In this video, I'm going to discuss the likes and dislikes that I have with 6 tents that I have either previously owned or currently own. North Face Westwind, North Face Mountain25, North Face Mountain35, North Face Ve25, Hilleberg Soulo, and Hilleberg Akto. With all of these tents, I have a lot of experience using them all in different types of conditions, from snow to high wind to conditions like you see now. With each tent, I'm going to discuss 5 things that I love about the tent and 3 things that I hate about the tent. Why 5 versus 3? Well, at the end of the day, there's no point in me purchasing or buying a tent unless I like more things than I dislike. So all of these tents are 4-season tents. I'm based in Northern Ireland and it's incredibly windy, so I need a tent that is very, very strong and also quite lightweight. So over the years, I've maybe started with larger, heavier tents, and I'm afraid as I've got older, I've progressed to sort of smaller, lighter tents. So the first feature that I love about the North Face Mountain25 is its strength. It's fully geodesic design with 5 pole crossing points, roof and 4 corners. The poles are grouped towards either end of the tent, and that throws strength towards the front and the back and makes it potentially a little bit weaker in the middle. But at the end of the day, you're always going to pitch this tail into the wind. So the strength at the rear here, because of the pole crossing points, and the pole crossing points are actually quite low, it gives it tremendous resistance against the wind. This is very strong when it's not guyed out, and when it's guyed out, you know, the strength here is actually phenomenal. The second thing that I love about this tent is just the features, particularly on the inside for the livability. You have 4 pockets, 2 at the front and 2 at the back, and a further 2 pockets in the roof at the front and 2 pockets in the roof at the back. So that just gives you phenomenal storage. The tent also is very, very well ventilated, so this little additional pole here adds minimum weight, but it obviously holds this out, and then you've got really good vents underneath here. The guy line system on this tent, you know, you have Kevlar guy lines, and these are all reflective, and the 3-into-1 system, you know, gives phenomenal support to the tent. One thing I will say though is when this is pegged out, you need to make sure that your pegging option is very, very secure, because if that fails, then, you know, there's 3 points of the tent then that have slightly less support. Another feature that I love about this tent would simply be construction. You know, the construction across all of the tent, you know, stitching, for example, is absolutely perfect. And the guy lines here have further fabric welded in behind them, you know, so they're really, really strong. Just general build quality is absolutely fantastic. I haven't found a single stitch or anything wrong with this tent since I've had it. And the 5th feature that I like about this tent really is just the ease of pitching. And the inner tent has a combination of pole sleeves and clips, and if it's incredibly windy and as long as it's not raining or snowing, you can open the front and back of the tent up and allow the wind to blow through it, which means it's really easy to get the structure erected in really, really strong winds. So now to a couple of things that I dislike about the tent. And the only wear that I can see on a tent over all of the years is actually on the pole crossing points on the inner. And these, when it's windy, the poles have just kind of like rubbed together, and that has made holes in all of the internal pole sleeves. So one main criticism for me is that the tent needs reinforcement at that particular point. Because if I didn't have those wear points in this tent, the tent is still pretty much like brand new over many, many years of extremely harsh use. The second thing that I dislike about this tent, and it really only is personal preference, is that the tent pitches inner first. Now, in general, inner tent first pitching tents will have more tension on the inner, so there's less flapping around in high winds. That's one of the main benefits of an inner tent first pitch. Okay. However, the problem is that if it's really windy or raining or snowing, the tent is very vulnerable until you get the fly sheet on. All of my tents here that pitch inner first, I've got bent poles on them all, and that's been either taking the tent down or trying to set the tent up. And lastly, on this tent, there is no doubt that it is very effective if you have the guy lines here and the guy line attachments secured to the poles, because they then directly support the main structure of the tent. The problem here is that all of these North Face tents use Velcro attachments, and I can tell you now, if it's extremely windy or cold, They are almost impossible to do. They do work, but they are so hard to use during setup. Difficult to use with gloves because you just can't get the Velcro to match. And if you're using it in cold conditions then with bare hands, your hands are absolutely freezing. This is a North Face Westwind. Here are the 5 things that I love about this tent. First of all, this tent has a fantastic strength to weight to volume ratio. It is a 3-pole tunnel, and it weighs in at 2.7 kilograms. Sorry, the Mountain25 there that I mentioned actually is about 4.5 kilograms. So this is 2.7. What I really wanted is I had the Mountain25 first, and I wanted then to try and get a tent that was a little bit lighter and it wasn't sacrificing too much in strength. So the North Face Westwind here I thought was a really, really good compromise, and it has turned out over the years to be a fantastic compromise because it is significantly lighter than the Mountain25, but also incredibly strong. Now, the 3-pole tunnel design reduces the panel size, which makes it a lot, more quiet in heavy winds. And also the main stress is on this one center pole, which I have actually double poled. The pole at the back here is just so small it doesn't really take any stress, and so all the stress is on this one, and I have double poled it, which takes it up to about 3 kilograms. I have had this tent out when the forecast has been for 80-mile-an-hour winds, and I've been on the summit where that forecast was for 80-mile-an-hour winds. Now on that occasion I reckon it wasn't just as bad as that, but it was probably 60 to 70, and I was inside this tent and it actually wasn't even worried. It handled the winds incredibly well. The volume on the inside, I mainly use these 2-person tents just on my own, so the volume inside for 1 person in this tent is fantastic, and maybe not just as good for 2 as what the Mountain25 would be, but for 1 it's amazing. Second thing I love about this tent is the construction quality. All of the stitching is just absolutely perfect no matter where you look at the tent. It's fabulous, it really gives you confidence in the quality of the product. The third thing that I love about this North Face Westwind is the quality of some of the fabrics. This fly sheet fabric is full silicone coated on both sides, and it is incredibly strong. I reckon this tent was probably made in about 2005, and the fly sheet still is in absolutely perfect condition. North Face also used some of the fly sheet fabric on the inner tent. The front door is all fly sheet fabric. The 2 sort of like quarter panels at the side are fly sheet fabric, and the same at the rear. And this just adds to the overall protection that you get from the inner tent, because all of those areas then are completely waterproof. However, you will get a little bit more condensation. Fourth aspect of this tent that I just love, I really, really like the tent design. The 3 poles over the main structure just gives it really, really good support. It is incredibly aerodynamic because of the height drop off towards the back. It's also quite narrow at the back and widens out. And as I said earlier on, because all the main stress is on this one pole, if you double pole this pole, it just makes the tent really, really strong. I also like the aerodynamic front. So if the wind direction changes, it's very, very aerodynamic from the front, and it's well supported from the side, better supported than most tunnels because it has the 3 poles to support the side than a lot of tunnels which just have 2. The first aspect of this tent that I dislike, and that's the North Face Westwind, is the fact that it pitches inner first. Inner first tents, like I said earlier on, have the benefit of giving you really good internal tension and reducing the flapping in the wind. The disadvantage is that they are very vulnerable when you're setting them up. This tent still has a bent pole on this side from exactly that, when it got hit by a couple of gusts from very random directions, just nearly completely flattened it. And it's not at its full strength until it is as you see it now, with the fly sheet on attached and tensioned. The second thing that I dislike about this tent, and it's all North Face tents, and I will show it and demonstrate it on every tent because I hate it so much, and that is underneath here, you've guessed it, Velcro attachments. And I've had so many problems over the years trying to get these done in harsh conditions. There's got to be a better way of attaching the fly sheet to the poles. Mountain Hardware use a clip system, which is a little bit easier, and a company called Slingfin I think used sort of like a loop and toggle, which I think is probably the best of all 3. The third and final thing that I dislike about this North Face Westwind is it is designed as a two-person tent, and I feel that the interior volume and livability isn't that good for two people. Again, I've mainly used it on my own and it has been amazing, but for two people you're limited with pockets, you're limited sort of with space. Yes, of course you can manage, but you've really only got one vestibule, and because it's so aerodynamic, you know, it loses a lot of actual volume. So that would be my third dislike about this tent. Designed for two people, but the livability for two people is a little bit limited. This is my Hilleberg Soulo. Here are the 5 things that I absolutely love about this Hilleberg Soulo. First up, you've guessed it, it's incredibly strong. I've had this tent out in measured 60 mile/hour winds and it has coped absolutely no problem. The design of the guy line attachments and the way that they support the poles just means that it is really, really incredibly strong. The tent is narrow at one end and slightly wider at the other, which again contributes to its aerodynamic profile. It's also quite vertical at this point and then goes sort of horizontal, again helping it with aerodynamics. It just is so strong. It's a little bit heavy, but the strength is fantastic. The second thing I love about this Hilleberg Soulo is the ease of pitching, particularly when I've been trying to manage the internal tents, the tents that pitch internal first, to move on to this system where you insert the poles in the pole sleeves and then clip it from the ground up. Is so manageable in any conditions, and it just makes it putting the tent up and taking it down in high winds an absolute breeze, excuse the pun. The third thing that I like about my Hilleberg Soulo is the materials used. This is a 30 denier double silicone coated fly sheet. When I say it's double silicone, it's coated on both sides with 3 layers of silicone, and that just gives the fly sheet a really, really good strength to weight ratio. Its tear strength is actually 12 kilograms, so it's incredibly hard to tear. The fourth thing that I love about this tent is actually the construction. And that's just the way that it is made. The pole clips here clip directly onto like a sort of a vinyl sort of polymer fabric, and then this is then stitched into the normal fabric, and that just spreads the stress. Even the poles are 100 denier nylon here, so the pole sleeves are very, very durable too. The fifth and final thing that I love about this tent is I think it has a very, very good weight to strength to volume ratio, you know, so I don't really think there's anywhere where you could use lighter fabrics, because I think that would reduce the durability and strength of the tent. So I think when you look at this as a fully freestanding tent with 3 poles supporting the structure, you know, there's not really any lighter poles in the market. There's not really any lighter fabric on the market, you know, that is as strong as a still nylon. Now some of the Cuban fiber fabrics potentially would be, but then there's pros and cons to that as well. So I think it would be very hard for Hilleberg to make this tent any stronger without making it heavier. So I think that strength to weight to volume ratio in a tent is fantastic. So what are the things I dislike about this tent? First of all, the inner tent I think could be under greater tension, and it is noisy in high winds as it just flaps around quite a lot. The second thing that I dislike about this tent is it really only has 1 pocket, and then it has stitching in the middle to divide it into 2 separate compartments, but I really feel that they could make better pockets in the tent. And the last thing that I'll discuss in this tent, while it is incredibly easy to pitch, I dislike the time that it takes to pitch. So clipping all of these clips takes a bit of time. The fact that the poles here have 2 separate guy line attachments takes a bit of time as well. Because there are so many guy lines on this tent, you have to have these done up like this before you pitch it, or else everything will become a tangled mess. So again, if it's set up like this before you're going to pitch, you have to undo all of these, you know, before you can actually get the guy lines out. So it's very simple and straightforward, but it just takes a bit of time to actually pitch. So that will be the third thing that I dislike about this Hilleberg Soulo. This is now the North Face Mountain35. So what are the 5 things that I like about this tent? First up, again, it has to be strength. This tent actually has no less than 9 pole crossing points. So roof, 4 corners, and actually at the side. So this just means that the tent is incredibly strong and resistant to snow loading and high winds from pretty much any angle. The second thing that I love about this North Face Mountain35 would be the interior features and again the livability. 4 massive deep pockets, 2 at the front, 2 at the back, and also 1 really deep pocket in the front roof and at the back as well. The tent also has good ventilation in the inside, so just the livability of the tent, also again with a really good extended vestibule here and a reasonable enough vestibule at the rear. The tent is very, very livable for 3 people. The third thing that I like about this tent is the material quality. Again, it's using a double silicone fly sheet fabric, which has a really, really good tear strength and a very high strength to weight ratio. I much prefer tents with a yellow inner to tents with a white or grey inner. I just think that they look better, and they also don't show dirt or watermarks as easy. I like the interior colour of this tent too, because it's actually a couple of different colours, and I'm sure it probably costs more to get fabric that is different colours than it will cost to get fabric that is one colour. But it's just a really nice bright place to be with a combination of the yellow and the grey, and that's sort of done on the outside of the tent as well. The last thing that I love about this tent is, again, I think it has a particularly good strength to weight to volume ratio. Again, the fabrics that are used I don't think really could be much better. The poles that are used are industry leading top DIC poles, and just the general volume and livability in the tent is really, really good. The extra pole crossing points at the side, again, when this is guyed out, just makes it really, really, really strong. So the tent has a great strength to weight to volume ratio. The weight of this tent actually is around 4.6 kilograms. So for the size that it is, it's very, very light. So you're going to guess my dislikes, and I'm not going to dwell on them too long. Inner tent, first, pitching and Velcro attachments. 2 main dislikes I have for this tent. The third dislike, it's not really a dislike, but it's in comparison with the Ve25. The Ve25 is incredibly versatile because you can actually sleep along it and you can also sleep across it. This tent's not just wide enough to sleep across. So I'm sort of trying to find something, because I can't really find very much that I do dislike about this tent. So that's just the third one. It's not quite as versatile as what the Ve25 would be. We are now looking at the North Face Ve25. Let's mix this up a bit and let's go straight to the things that I dislike about this tent. First of all, inner tent pitching. Secondly, yes, there are Velcros underneath here. And thirdly, I did mention when I was talking about the Mountain35 that you can sleep across this tent. It just means then that the tent is very, very wide, and that has a benefit. But the disadvantage is that from the rear, it has quite a large wind profile, and I think it just makes it less stable. So there's just such a volume of tent. You gain interior space, but you lack that little bit of strength because the tent is just so wide at the back. It's not so bad at the front because it's very aerodynamic, but at the back, it goes from narrow to wide very, very quickly, and it's not as aerodynamic as what it would be at the front. So now I'm going to look at the 5 things that I love about this tent. And firstly is just the look of the tent. I personally absolutely love it. The shape is very, very unique. It looks amazing from all angles. And I'm sorry, but when you're going to buy something, spend a lot of money on it, you do have to like the look of it. In conjunction with its looks, I mean, again, I do really like tents that are 2 colours. I think it's just more attention to detail. So I love the sort of yellow and grey colour combination on this. And I'll link that in with the look of the tent. The second thing that I love about the North Face Ve25 is it's just one of the most comfortable and livable tents that I've ever come across. You can sleep along it, you can sleep across it. Again, it has 4 massive deep internal pockets. It has 2 pockets then in addition to that, actually at these points in the roof that run the full width of the tent. It has multiple gear hanging loops and also has fantastic ventilation, and it has vents which correspond to the fly sheet. It has vents on the inner tent that correspond to the fly sheet here as well too. The third thing that I love about this tent, and I actually kind of mentioned it accidentally in respect of the comfort and livability, but I would give it that category all on its own, and that is the fact that you can sleep across the tent. This will allow you just if you pitch the tent and the ground's not good, gives you a bit more adjustability inside the tent. And also if you have 2 persons using the tent, Then each of them have vestibule front and rear. So the idea of sleeping across the tent I think is good. And also sometimes you just maybe prefer that on this occasion when you're camping you'll sleep across the tent as opposed to along it. Also across the tent it's so wide that if you're very, very tall, you've just got a lot more space there to do that. The fourth thing that I love about the North Face Ve25 is really just the construction. Like I said earlier, there's no point in the materials being good if it's not constructed well. The stitching and accuracy of stitching on a tent is absolutely second to none. All the stress points are reinforced. So for example, this loop here is attached in behind here, but there's a strap which runs behind the fly sheet here up to another attachment point, so that just makes that, you know, incredibly strong. So if you can see that there, that's just behind the fly sheet. You have extra fabric sewn in, and that's really thick nylon, and another batch of thick nylon here connected with a strap, so you're spreading the stress points over a really broad surface area. So I love that attention to detail with the construction. The fifth and final thing that I love about this tent is just the attention to detail, and that's just from start to finish all over the tent, from the fact that it is two different colors, from the fact that it has really, really good ventilation options inside and out, the construction, the window at the front, the pockets on the inside, just the overall attention to detail. Again, you won't just be able to see them here, but on the inside it has glow in the dark, you know, zipper pulls, the reflective guy lines, just again the attention to detail, fantastic in this tent. So what are the 5 things I love about my Hilleberg Akto? First of all, I really like the tent design. It's a single pole tunnel with 2 rods at either end to sort of give you the height. I like the way these rods are angled out. It just gives you more space on the inside, and the whole design gives you a great combination of space on the inside and space in the actual vestibule. The second thing I love about the Hilleberg Akto is the ease and speed of pitching. The single pole and pole sleeve, the pole just goes through there, it's connected in at the bottom. The tent will be pegged out only in 4 corners, and then it's just a matter of pulling out the ends here, and that's the tent up. And it would be a lot faster and easier, I think, than the Soulo. It's not just as complex. The third and fourth things that I like about the Hilleberg Akto would just simply be as same as the Soulo, and that is the materials used and the construction quality. Again, the pole sleeve, you know, is 100 denier, you know, nylon for durability. The guy lines are 3mm. They're tested to an 80 kilogram breaking strength. You know, so all the materials used, right down to the pole bags, the peg bags, everything is the highest quality that I have seen on the market. It's really, really good. The final thing that I love about the Hilleberg Akto is just its strength to weight to volume ratio. It's designed as a 4-season tent, and I think the weight of the fabrics are just about right. I think, you know, for example, a 70 denier ground sheet is, in my opinion, what you need for a 4-season tent. Any less than that and you're just sacrificing durability. And I would say exactly the same with the fly sheet and inner tent fabrics. If they get any lighter, if you're going to give them regular 4-season use, they just won't last as long, and they're also more prone to accidental damage. So I think that the strength, the volume of the tent and weight to ratios are absolutely spot on. I think, yes, you could make it lighter and you could make it stronger, but there would be significant sacrifices in order to do that. So what are the 3 things I dislike about this tent? First of all, you have pretty large panels with unsupported unsupported fabric. You know, so this is a lot of fabric, and in high winds, you know, this will flap around a lot on both sides. It's very strong, but it's maybe not as comfortable and wouldn't be as comfortable in high winds at the Soulo as the Soulo would be, because on it you have 3 poles supporting a similar volume of tent. The Akto really just has the one. The next thing that I dislike about the Akto, and I know a lot of people will be the opposite to what I am in this, but I actually think that the vestibule is too big I think the vestibule space on the Soulo is perfect. So I would like to see a little bit more internal volume and slightly less vestibule volume. And the last thing that I dislike about the Hilleberg Akto is it really only has one internal pocket, and I just think, you know, that would be very easy to make better. I saw a tent on eBay. I'm not sure what make it was. It was a similar design to this. It was a very, very cheap tent, but it actually had a pocket sewn in the full length of the inner. So it certainly would be possible to do that, and it would be nice to see Hilleberg sort of maybe just move forwards in that respect and just provide better pockets than some other tents. So now it comes to my final thoughts. I am not going to pick an absolute favourite tent of mine for over the years that I've had all of these. The reason for that is that all of the tents have compromises. Some of them are slightly stronger, some of them are a bit lighter. Over the years, my priorities have changed slightly. To begin with, the main factor I was looking for the type of camping that I would be doing was strength. So I purchased the Mountain25. This was an amazing tent, incredibly well featured and ridiculously strong. I mean, it just doesn't move in pretty much any wind from any direction. But over the years, I kind of thought, you know, it's a bit heavier, I'd love something lighter. So I purchased the Westwind. And I reckon the Westwind is about 90% as strong, but is actually significantly lighter. Mountain25 is 4.5 kilograms. The Westwind was 2.7. So this was a great compromise. For slightly different conditions and for a bit more volume, I then bought the Mountain35. And this represents a tremendous compromise. It has significantly more volume and space than the Mountain25, but it's actually a very similar weight. It's about 4.6 to 4.7 kilograms. And I could comfortably manage this on my own if I wanted to go up and camp where it wasn't going to be as exposed and I was wanting more space and volume. I had previously had a North Face Ve25 and I just loved the shape of it. And I loved the fact that you could lie across it as well as along it. And I just thought, after I'd had this for a while, I thought that I would change to the Ve25 again. So I purchased this. It's an amazing tent, but just for me, trying to manage it on my own, particularly pitching in high winds, it was a bit difficult. So I still have it, but it's probably going to be up for sale at some point. Following on from the Westwind, then again I was looking for strength but lighter weight, and I bought the Soulo. Absolutely fantastic tent, had it out in 60-mile-an-hour winds, does really, really well. But again, I sort of thought, you know, it still is heavy, maybe I could look at something a bit lighter. So I then eventually purchased the Akto. So weight-wise, I've always been looking to get lighter and lighter and lighter, and for 4-season use I probably wouldn't go any lighter than an Akto. That's just my personal opinion. So for me and the type of camping that I would be doing now, the Akto would be my go-to tent, just because it's got enough strength but it's also very, very lightweight. I'm not saying it's the best, that's just for the priorities that I have, it ticks the most boxes. So thank you for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed the video. Please comment and let me know what your tent collection has been and why. I will answer every sensible comment, so go ahead and leave me one if you can. Next up, I'm going to do a review of a couple more head torches, so watch out for that. Should be up in less than a week's time.